going on, everyone? You are listening to episode 60 of the Sports on Broadcast right here, presented by SE Radio and Sporting Edge. I'm your host, Tyler Edgerton, alongside Joe Fabiani. Joe, what's going on?
What's going on, brother? That was a long bye week. Let's get back to work.
Yeah, seriously, too much football, not including the Eagles. This episode, we're going to review Week 10 in the NFL with our biggest surprise and disappointments because the Eagles didn't play. We're going to go around the league for Week 11 and make some predictions, break down the Eagles' upcoming primetime showdown against those horrible Dallas Cowboys. And, of course, we are going to have a special guest joining us tonight. But first, we hope you can join us in the show by commenting on Facebook Live or Periscope. You can tweet us at Sporting Edge One. And, of course, you can simply text the SE Radio hotline at 267 404 MYSE. Before we get started, just want to let you guys know you can send your questions by the way of what I just said, and we will answer them in the second half of the show. But let's jump right into it, Joe. We got Week 10 in the NFL last week. Let's discuss some of the important news and notes while the Eagles were on the bye. Let's start with the fact that the teams around the league kind of made up some ground on the Eagles. You have the Vikings, Rams, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, and Lions all winning outside of the division. What were your thoughts on kind of Week 10 in the NFL?
First thought was I couldn't believe how the Saints jumped all over Buffalo. That was a game we talked quite a bit about last week. You know, we felt pretty confident in Sean McDermott going up against a team that he's very familiar with. But you know, after last week, we were texting during the game. The Saints are legit. I mean, that rushing attack is legit, and you know, obviously you have a future Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees, who isn't putting up quite the stats that we're used to seeing, but obviously he can still sling the rock. So that jumps out to me as worrisome.
Yeah, I mean, they had over 200 yards, and you're right. We talked about that last week. Like 10 days rest for the Bills. All right, it might be a tough battle, but the Saints may come out with a win. But we were both on the Bills thinking,
Yeah,
10 days rest, good defense, good offense. Defense usually wins out. But the game for me, not only the Falcons and Dallas, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this episode, but the Rams and the Vikings.
yeah,
The Rams, I don't know what happened there. Like the Texans used to be a good defense, and in the last 3 weeks they've given up 40 points to Seattle, and then what 33 points last week against the Rams. And then the Vikings, on the road, Case Keenum 4 touchdowns. What more can you say about those two games?
yeah. I mean, when you look at Houston, they're kind of depleted. You know, they're missing a few of their stars on the defensive side. So it's kind of understandable. And plus, obviously, taking that big loss, losing Deshaun Watson, kind of sucked the life out of that team. Unfortunately, you know, he was really, you know, the guy taking the reins and running with it. And you know, after seeing J.J. Watt go down and Merciless go down, you know, obviously the only guy really they had left that was going to keep them together was Watson, and they lost him. Unfortunately, in practice of all places,
Hmm.
you know, that has a lot to do with you know, their struggles on defense. You know, I just think that whole energy that they had for that nice 3 or 4 week run was just completely taken out on that Watson injury. But the Rams, you know, it's surprising. You know, I kind of thought they would fall off a bit, but you know they're still firing on all cylinders and they're leading the league in total offense. And you know that's crazy to say out loud considering where they were this time last year.
Yeah, I mean, Sean McVay's done a very good job, but that game, through the first one quarter, I guess, kind of the first half was a 9-7 game. And then in the second half, they just kind of came out and destroyed the Texans, outscoring them by at least 20 points. I mean, the game got ugly very quickly. Um, and it's kind of surprising, too, because they don't have, yeah, they have Sammy Watkins, but he arrived early or he arrived late in camp, and then Robert Woods. They're not doing it with Antonio Brown or Julio Jones. They do have Todd Gurley back there, possibly the best running back in the league this year. But other than that, you kind of look around. They don't have a tight end to rely on, so that was definitely surprising. Case Keenum again. He had two god awful interceptions, but the game was kind of sealed at that point.
Yeah.
But Stephon Diggs and Thielen are really good targets, and then they got their run game going against Washington as well. Let
Yeah. You know, and their defense, obviously, being able to be physical and cause turnovers helps them a lot.
for both the
It's a team
teams.
that you're going to look at, but as we talked about last week, Case Keenum's not somebody who's going to scare you coming into your stadium in the playoffs.
Right, right. All right, let's jump into some of the players that the Eagles signed right before the trade deadline, not free agency. They brought in Jay Ajayi. We did get a quick little glimpse at him against the Broncos. Looked very good, but they also signed two veterans who have Super Bowl experience. They brought in offensive tackle Will Beatty, who did not play so far this season, but he was a giant. He was part of the 2011 Super Bowl run. And then, of course, they add on the defensive side of the ball Dannell Ellerbe, a linebacker who's played for the Ravens and the Saints. What are your thoughts on those two kind of coming in? They're both on 1 year deals.
I really like the Ellerbe signing. He's a very physical player. His downfall over the last 3 or 4 seasons to this point has been injuries, unfortunately. He was a beast for that Ravens team back when they made their Super Bowl run.
Mm-hmm.
And then he signed a nice deal down in Miami, I believe. Was there for a stint, and then kind of fell off. Really wasn't able to stay healthy with the Saints, and he said he came out and said that his foot has completely healed, and he's ready to go. But you got to kind of wonder where he is as far as football shape goes. I don't really think he's going to be up to game speed yet. But it's a veteran who's gone through the playoffs and gotten to the Super Bowl, so you like that, and he can play middle linebacker and strong side. So that's something they desperately need, especially with how thin they are at linebacker. And Will Beatty's just another depth signing on the offensive line, and another veteran who's been there and really has made runs. So that's a great depth signing again by Howie Roseman. You really got to tip your cap to what he's done over the last few weeks and in the offseason. He's done a tremendous job.
Yeah, and let's not get too crazy. These guys aren't going to be starters. Ellerbe, I think, has a better chance of starting kind of down the road. I think what you're going to see this week is he's on a limited snap count, but once he learns the defense, he's been a linebacker before. He knows how to diagnose a play. I think if Joe Walker kind of struggles in the starting role, I would say Ellerbe will become the one or two kind of in the rotation, and maybe even take over the play calling later on if Bradham still isn't doing it. I didn't get a chance to see last week who called them. But Ellerbe, I think, is a guy, come week 14, 15, 16, 17, is a guy that'll step in, get a lot more snaps. When you look at Will Beatty, for me, it's just kind of a depth signing, like you said. It's now week 11, and he's still not signed, so that kind of tells you something, especially with, the Giants' offensive line, where he was in camp. They've been struggling all season, so to see him not sign, not sure what you're getting, but the backup for now was Taylor Hart, who transferred from defensive line to offensive tackle. So at least you're getting a guy in there with some experience, 7 years in the league. And that'll wrap up that because Joe has nothing else to say. All right. Uh,
Sorry, I
no,
froze
it's
for a
fine.
split second.
The final news and notes kind of coming out of Eagles training this week would be that Ronald Darby is now fully healthy and ready to go. Zach Ertz still questionable. We'll touch on him a little bit later. But Ronald Darby, what do you think his role is going into Dallas this week?
Uh, from everything I've read so far, that he's on track to start this game. Now, I don't know how long he's gonna be in the game. Granted, he'll play a lot, but I think they're gonna have to sub him out quite often, like another guy coming back from an injury. It's just like, he's just not going to have his legs underneath him,
Right.
especially coming off an ankle injury. So he's definitely going to be winded, more often than not, I would think. But it's definitely a boost to that secondary. Him getting an extra week on the bye, and they really didn't need to pressure him back, and he's able to get 100% healthy, and hopefully he just he gets his legs under him after 2 weeks. But I would expect him to play fairly well. I mean, he looked pretty good until he got injured. But I mean, Jalen Mills and Rasul Douglas are still going to have big roles on the defense going forward.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that I really liked is there was a report, and I'm sorry, I don't know who it was, but they basically said that Darby, since he's been injured, has still had his head in the playbook, and he's been feeding off the guys in the locker room. That's huge. But as far as like this upcoming week, I don't expect him. Maybe he's the starter, but I don't expect him to be. Again, I think he's going to be on a limited snap count, and the one thing I do really like is Des Bryant is kind of fallen off, but he's a bigger body, so you can stick Rasul Douglas on the outside with the size, and then Ronald Darby on the outside with the speed. But just looking forward, like look at this team. Once you get Sidney Jones back, you have Darby, Jalen Mills playing way over his head. You know, Rasul Douglas, who I think eventually transfers to a safety spot. You got Ronald Darby and even Patrick Robinson as depth. I really like where this secondary is going.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be intriguing going forward, especially in the next year or two. Like you said, they're very young. It's a great problem to have. I mean, for years, all we did was complain about how terrible the secondary was, and now they have a bunch of promising prospects coming up, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time right now to be an Eagles fan. I know me personally, I try not to get too high and too low on them, but when you really look at the depth that they've been able to to get across the roster at this point in positions of need. They still have some spots to fill, like we talked about with the linebacker spot. But where it really counts, they have the depth right now, and it's really great to see for once because we haven't been able to talk about that for 3 seasons now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done a really good job too of kind of staying with, not getting too high, too low, taking this team week to week. I mean, for the first quarter of the season, I know we kind of had worries that like the cornerbacks were playing a little bit above their head, but now that we're 10 games in or 10 weeks in, like I think that's not an aberration anymore. You can kind of tell. Um, Looks like we're having a sound problem. Give me one sec. Sorry about that, guys. Let's see if that changes it. Joe, can you hear me a little bit better?
I can hear you, but you sound like you're very far away from your mic.
Me?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll try and
Obviously,
work
it's right in
through
your
it.
face, though.
Yeah, we'll try and work through it. Sorry guys if you can't hear us. Let us know if you can. If not, at least you'll be able to hear us on the podcast next week. But yeah, just kind of getting back to the secondary. Um, you know, they've been playing above their head, and it's not an admiration anymore.
Right. And I think they've improved almost every week. To be honest with you, Russell Douglas is, nobody expected him to step in and do the job that he's been doing. And, realistically, I think I've seen a few times on Pro Football Focus that, if Marshawn Lattimore wasn't playing, out of this world, he would be, one of the, or if not the best top rookie corner this season. But, he's in the mix. So it's been a revelation, honestly.
All right, we're trying to move up the volume a little bit. Sounds like it's still kind of low. Just bear with us. Trying to do the best we can. But let's wrap up before we get our special guest on the line calling in a minute. Let's just wrap up with our biggest surprise and disappointment from Week 10 in the NFL. Joe, do you want to start?
No, you can take it, brother.
All right, so we hit on it quickly, but I was really just surprised at the way the Saints were able to run the ball. They've really changed. They have over 200 yards rushing, and we talked about the game a lot last week. The fact that, Sean Payton goes in there on the road. The Saints are a dome team, and they put up over 40 points and just blast the Bills, who came off, 10 days of rest. That was really shocking to me. And then as far as disappointment, I guess you could say it's another surprise too. I mean, the Giants go out there and lose to San Francisco. I'm really surprised that Ben McAdoo held on to his job this week. And Joe, not to cut you off, but it looks like we have our man on the line. And let's welcome him in right now to the SE Radio Hotline. It would be Gail Saunders from 4th and John. 4th and John doing some great work. You can follow him at Eagle Sessions on Twitter. Gail, how's it going tonight?
What's up, guys? I mean, it's Dallas week. Who's not excited? Who's not excited about Dallas week?
Oh, I know. Our juices are flowing. Everyone's pumped. So some of the things we kind of recapped in the beginning of the show were the new pieces the Eagles added since the trade deadline in the bye week. But let's start with the Eagles as a whole and look at the difference. Let's get your opinion on the biggest reason for the success in 2017 as opposed to the 7-9 team in 2016. What would you say is the biggest change?
I think first and foremost, you got to think about Lane Johnson, what he meant to this team last year. You didn't see it because he missed 10 games. Obviously, you have But I mean, obviously, you have a Carson Wentz who's progressed. You have a team that's really rallied around him, and most importantly, this front seven has been amazing. I can't stress enough the front seven, the interior pressure that they've been bringing all season has been amazing as well. And then you got to look at the weapons around Carson Wentz as well. I mean, if you're looking back to that Dallas Cowboys game last season, DGB, guys like Jordan Matthews, Ryan Matthews, guys that are not on this roster anymore. He's got new weapons, and Alshon Jeffrey, a new and improved breakout season. Zach Ertz, guys that can stretch the field, players that make defenses defend the whole field now. And I mean, it's been amazing. So, and then we didn't even talk about the running backs. I mean, Ajayi is still just an uncracked talent on this field yet. So
yeah, absolutely.
We just got a little piece last week. So.
Speaking of that, Gail, who would you say on both sides of the ball, offense and defensive, who would you say to this point has been the MVP on each side of the ball?
I mean, obviously you have to say, Carson Wentz. 23 TDs. I mean, that's 23 TDs and 5 interceptions. That's crazy. You have to say Carson Wentz. He's really been taking that next level. I mean, you want to see from your quarterback in his sophomore season. He's done that in a little bit more. You're starting to see him change the plays at the line. I love the run pass options that we're seeing from him. On defense, I'm still gonna have to go Fletcher Cox. I think he brings so much to the table. With the interior pressure, I think that's the biggest difference maker across the line. So going with Fletcher Cox.
Two great choices for sure. What about any offseason acquisitions? Which one would you say how he hit out of the park this season?
Oh man, I mean I think it's if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say it's a group effort of bringing the right pieces to the table at the right for the right price. You think about like a no-name guy like a Corey Graham who doesn't get that much hype for a depth player. You look at a guy like Patrick Robinson who came in on the cheap. These are all guys around $1 million under. LeGarrette Blount, Alshon Jeffrey has been, everyone's talking about the stats, but I really think he's shown what a team guy he is. And even though Torrey Smith isn't, putting up stats either, he's kind of regressed. I think him being on the field does work. I mean, you have to. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a vertical threat. But I mean, if you really want me locking in one guy, I'd probably have to say Alshon Jeffrey. His presence alone has been amazing for Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and Gail,
and Zach Ertz, and Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, absolutely, Gail. I heard you say yesterday too that teams are only as good as their depth, and when you do sign guys like Corey Graham, it's been huge. But I think the one guy for me has kind of been Chris Long, in the fact that he's playing for free.
Yes.
And the fact that,
right,
Malcolm Jenkins
right.
has stepped up, he's had the leadership on the field. We've all known that. But, he's stepped up in society, and Chris Long has followed. And there's been other guys, going around the city and handing out turkeys for Thanksgiving and everything like that. I definitely agree with kind of the collaboration of guys that they brought in.
Yeah, right? Doesn't it feel like it's the right recipe of talent and right recipe of like leadership? I think if you've been watching this team long enough, I've like I said, I'm a Kelly Green wearer. So I've watched guys like Reggie White. I watched guys like Jerome Brown and Randall Cunningham play. I watched the 2004 run. Been a it's been the perfect blend of talent and athletes, but like I haven't seen in ever, in a real long time. So
We're on the line with Fourth and John's
excited,
Gales.
man.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
so excited.
We're on the line with Fourth and John's Gale Saunders. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Eagle Sessions, doing great work on there. Let's transition to some of the new guys that the Eagles have brought in over the past few weeks. What do you expect from Jay Ajayi to add to the team in the second half of the season?
Well, I think Jay Ajayi, he gives you a perfect blend of power and a guy who can create on his own. He's not like the burner, but he's got some speed to get to the outside. If he can remain healthy, you don't have to he doesn't have to be your workhorse when you have Blount and you have Clement, who can also provide some backup for him. But some of the running style, some of the running plays that he was familiar with from the Dolphins, we utilized some of those zone runs. So it's a perfect system for him to transition to. So I'm excited about Ajayi. I think when you need two road graders with the playoffs coming down the road, because I do think this team is going to be a playoff team. Those are the perfect type of running backs married with our offensive line that can wear down defenses.
Yeah.
And what would you think what they did over the bye week, bringing in Dannell Ellerbe and Will Beatty? What do you think they can add to this team going forward?
Well, it's funny because Will Beatty, I actually put out a tweet in August of 2016 about Howie Roseman signing Will Beatty, because I just felt like he was a guy. He was a guy that would be a perfect depth player. Mm-hmm. Plus, coming, he knows the NFC East well. He's got the playoff experience, Super Bowl experience. He had a torn pec in 2014. And then he ended up tearing his rotator cuff a year later. So that's why we haven't seen anything from Will Beatty since 2014. So while he was training, that's when he got injured. But I think it's that Super Bowl experience. They're looking to go for a run. So obviously they're bringing in guys with playoff experience, a lot of games under their belt. Ellerbe, another guy who has experience with Joe Douglas in his Raven days. Played with the Saints, played with the Dolphins as well. Dealt with a foot injury. At the time, he wasn't healthy enough for them to, start the season. So he ended up getting cut. I guess for the money he was making, he got cut. So a lot of players actually. Corey Graham played with him. Who else played with him? Torrey Smith played with him as well. Mm-hmm. But you see the common denominator is that Super Bowl experience. And he provides depth for, with Jordan Hicks and being out and, Michael Kendrick stepping up and Bradham as well. I think that kind of tells you what they feel about Joe Walker. Joe Walker can still play special teams, but, if they need a guy to come in and give you a plug-and-play feel, I think Ellerbe fits that role pretty nicely.
Right. All right, let's stop messing around. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. We got Dallas on top Sunday night. Gale,
meat and potatoes.
What does Dallas week mean to you personally?
Dallas week is, it's a team that we love to hate. If you were raised by your father well, he would teach you to hate the Cowboys. But being of when you get up there in years, I lived through those Super Bowl wins in the 90s. Mm. I was in high school, and I was the only Eagle fan living in Connecticut. I dealt with Cowboy fans way up there.
They're everywhere, man.
I used to hear
everywhere. It. There's trolls everywhere.
It was 93, 94, 94, 96. Even in college, I had to deal with it. So it's just beating the Cowboys. That's what you do. That's That's the game that you pencil in, circle on your calendar. I mean, that's the game that you got to win every year.
Yeah.
No matter what the record, you got to win that game.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the guys we didn't touch on with you, but we talked about a little bit earlier, is getting back Ronald Darby. Do you think he's handed the starting job back this week, or are they going to mix him in? And what role do you see him playing kind of for the rest of the season, but specifically against Dallas?
I think they are going to put him in the starting role. I think they gave up that third for a reason. They obviously like what he brings to the table. I mean, you can't recreate 4.3 speed. I feel like they're probably gonna have a nice little rotation between him, Jalen Mills, and Russell Douglas. I feel like you got to play him on the outside. I feel like I think it's going to be Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby starting. But I think moving forward, I mean, if you're gonna look to the future, if they don't decide to bring back like a Patrick Robertson who's played lights out, you could potentially move Jalen Mills inside.
Yep.
And then have a nice rotation between Sidney Jones, Ronald Darby, and Russell Douglas.
Do you think there's a chance?
But this week, I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think there's a chance that Douglas eventually transitions to a safety because of his size?
That's something I've talked about earlier this week. Jalen Mills has safety experience, but when you think about Russell Douglas, he showed that element in his game to come up and make tackles at the line of scrimmage. He's not like a thumper, but he's a guy with range. I mean, he led the NCAA in interceptions last year with like 7 interceptions, I believe, or maybe 10 interceptions.
Yep.
So I feel like he's got that eye, man. But you have like this, your stockpile of young talent at the cornerback position, which is pretty amazing. On our show last night, I talked about what the Eagles are paying for cornerbacks this season, and the production that we're getting, we're only paying $5.2 million for all the cornerbacks we have on the roster. That's pretty amazing.
It's a beautiful thing
for the production that we're getting. So, yep.
Now, specifically looking at this matchup, is there any guys you're looking at, that you're really excited to see go up against other guys, like maybe Brandon Graham going against, anyone on the offensive line, or vice versa, and Vinny Curry on the other side, abusing the young man who got beat up last week by Adrian Claiborne?
You got to be excited about whoever Brandon Graham is going up against, especially if Tyron Smith is out there. I know they put Bell in after Chad Green got annihilated. Bell also had a terrible game. If you look at, I believe he gave up 2 sacks. Green gave up 6 sacks. And it was funny that Claiborne was talking about he only knows one move, and he kept using it.
Yeah.
On Green. But I like to see. I'm really excited to see Fletcher Cox and Jernigan. We all know how well Zach Martin's played and Frederick has played over the years. But I mean, if you look at some of the beat writers that follow the Cowboys very closely, they've noticed that they've kind of messed up on the interior.
Mm-hmm.
So and plus it's Fletcher Cox. I mean, he's done a phenomenal job. But then also, we're too deep. We're too deep at all across the front, and I feel like by the end of the game, that's when you see the rotation helping out our defensive line.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Gail, before we get you out of here, let's get your final prediction.
I'm gonna go 30, 31 points. I mean, we're averaging 31.4 points a game. And I really feel like it's going to be 31-14. I think it's going to be too much to handle for the Cowboys. I mean, they're dealing with injuries with Sean Lee being out, Ezekiel Elliott not there. Yeah. Dak's in predictable passing situations, which isn't good for him. It's going to be a 30-burger on primetime television.
Beautiful. I love it. Gail,
beautiful thing.
Gail, we appreciate you taking some time out, coming on the show tonight. Look forward to talking to you down the road.
All right, guys. It's been a pleasure. Take it easy.
You too.
Take care, Gail.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
All right, that was Gail Saunders from fourthandjohn.com. You can check him out at Eagle Sessions on Twitter. A lot of good stuff there, Joe. Anything that kind of stuck out to you specifically?
He has me really excited about this defensive line matchup. It's, you can't double everyone, and even when you just look at their starters, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jernigan, and Vinny Curry. I mean, what are you going to do? Double Fletcher Cox? Okay, then you have Jernigan. All right, what are you going to do? Have an extra guy? You know what I mean? It's impossible to cover all these guys. I'm sorry. You're basically relying on, one-on-one battles, and, I would say 9 times out of 10, most of these guys on this line are going to win that battle.
And I think the push up the middle that Timmy Jernigan and Fletcher Cox give the Eagles is something that Dak isn't really used to. I know that they went up against a pretty good Atlanta Falcons defense last week, but as long as you contain him in the pocket, I think Dak isn't as effective as some other quarterbacks. And now you're putting pressure in his face too, along with the edges. It'll definitely be interesting Sunday night to see how he handles it. But now it's time, guys, to jump into some of our Twitter and Facebook questions you guys have thrown us. So let's get it going with some trivia music in the background. And we'll start off with Twitter. Matt on Twitter says, will somebody posterize Lonzo Ball tonight? If so, who?
Embiid. Next.
Embiid? No, he's gonna see. This is the thing. He's gonna get out the way. He's not gonna get posterized. He's gonna get out the way if there's a free runner at him. Of course, this comes off the tweet that Ben Simmons' sister put out, I guess, that said, I hope you basically dunk on him so hard his daddy has to come out onto the court. So we shall see. I'm definitely excited for that at 10:30. Gina on Twitter, big Flyer fan. She asks, is Dave Hackstall going to last the entire season? Joe, I'll throw this to you.
Yes, he will last the entire season. I know there's a lot of frustrated Flyers fans haven't been shut out again, but I would say that Hextall went out of his way to handpick this guy. Unfortunately, they're going to experience some growing pains. I know Flyers fans we're not always a patient bunch, but unfortunately, our team is extremely young. They're playing different. You got Giroux playing a different position this year. You got a lot of guys banged up. But realistically, what you can look at is, the goalies have played extremely well right now, and that's a positive you can take out of it. I know it's frustrating they haven't scored like we would like them to do, but I definitely think he's going to be there.
Yeah, I mean they're 8-2 on the season. We shall see. All right, let's jump to Chris on Twitter. What is the probability that Wentz wins MVP, Doug Coach of the Year, and Howie Executive of the Year? I don't know if you can necessarily put a probability on it, but I would say, if they continue in this direction, and I will say if they do make the Super Bowl, then they might have a clean sweep. I think as far as Coach of the Year goes right now, I personally would give it to Sean McVay. He's really stepped in, young guy, and, we talked about the Rams a lot, but just the way he's transitioned, Jared Goff into an NFL quarterback has been pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's tough to really get into that stuff halfway through the season. I would say, you could definitely say that they're favorites, but there's a couple other coaches who are having great seasons, and I when you really look at like what the Eagles have done, I really do think you can make a great case for Howie Roseman. That's one I could definitely see. Like, that wouldn't shock me. To see Doug win Coach of the Year would definitely surprise me. But if Carson Wentz continues to play the way he has in the first half of the season, you would expect him to win the MVP award, especially if they get to the Super Bowl.
If you guys have any questions, you can send them to us on Facebook, Periscope, or tweet us at SportingEdge1. Let's switch over to Facebook right now. Jimmy says, when's the next time the Eagles lose, Joe? We don't have the schedule in front of us, but off memory, I think it's Dallas, Chicago, Seattle, LA, Giants, Oakland, Dallas. If I'm correct, any of those ring a bell?
I'm not going to pick one particular game, but I think they will lose one of those West Coast games. It's either going to be Seattle or the Rams.
Yeah, I agree. I think, when you really look at it, I think they take care of Dallas, and Chicago shouldn't be an issue at all. I agree with you. It's got to be one of the West Coast games, but the way that Seattle has kind of lost Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas is banged up. I really think the Eagles can go out there and actually get a win, which is very tough to do in Seattle. But that second game, I know they're not coming back and then flying back out, but that, if they go into Seattle and get that win, there might be a bit of a hangover heading to the Rams. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough road trip. To expect them to go out there and win 2 straight games, it's kind of unrealistic. Especially just, you're in a different bed. You're not home. You're not in your comfort of your own home. You're not training in your usual spot. You're not practicing in the usual spot. Everything about that road trip screams at least one loss.
As crazy as this sounds, I think the one upset on your calendar for the Eagles might be that Giants game, just because of how close they played last time. Andrew on Facebook says, more touches on Sunday, Ajayi or LeGarrette Blount?
Go ahead, Ty.
I would say probably. That one's hard. I would say Ajayi, because he's going to be the featured back. I heard great things over the bye week of how fast he picked up the offense. I think he'll see a great increase in snap counts, and Blount will still get the goal line work. But I would say Ajayi touches the ball through the air and on the ground roughly 20 times this week.
Wow, 20?
Yeah. Well, he had
You're being generous.
He had 8 last week, so you got to figure, if he has 3-4 catches, maybe he sees the rest on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I guess it's not really crazy to say, but I really do think that when you look at the backs, it's really not just Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount. You also got to figure in Corey Clement. They really like what he provides them. So I really think it's more of a 3-headed backfield as opposed to a 2-headed backfield. And I would say that I do think Ajayi is going to have more touches overall than Blount does, but I think that we're going to see 3 guys get involved.
All right, final question we have, Aaron on Facebook. Who is your new Super Bowl pick? Of course, we had some old ones that are struggling a little bit early in the season. Do we want to recap or? Yeah.
No, we don't have to recap.
No. Let's recap. So we had you actually were looking good for a while there. You had Green Bay and Pittsburgh, but Aaron Rodgers goes down. They have to sneak into the playoffs for any chance of that. I, on the other hand, had Oakland and Seattle, which I guess is still a possibility, but Oakland has been a big disappointment. My main pick for that was because I thought Marshawn Lynch, year rested, would come in and kind of dominate, but obviously I'm wrong on that. So who's your new Super Bowl pick, Joe?
Oof. I will say that the Super Bowl that I'm extremely hopeful for, because it would make amazing headlines, would have to be the Eagles and the Chiefs. It would be awesome if that was the case. The Eagles going against their former head coach, Andy Reid. You got Doug Peterson going against his former teacher, and Andy Reid. It would be an amazing story.
And just think about, the 2 weeks leading up to that. Oh, my gosh. Like, just Eagles fans going crazy. Chiefs are diehard fans. It's not like, they're fraud fans who, oh, yeah, we're in the Super Bowl. Let's climb aboard. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, everything you said about mentor-student, and really they both have really good teams. Alex Smith is playing really well. They both are good on offense, have dynamic players on either side of the football, and yeah, that would be interesting. Of course, I'm hoping that the Eagles make it. Will they? I think they do. I really think they do. I think the one team that can knock them off is the Saints, and we are taking it week to week, so I'm not going to get crazy. I'm just going to enjoy the ride. But if I had to go Super Bowl now, I would say probably New England, just because they've been there so many times, and the Philadelphia Eagles because of how good they've looked through the first half of the season. obviously a lot can change. So that's going to wrap up our questions that you guys sent us. Thank you again. And you guys, of course, can send that to our Facebook Live feed, Periscope, or tweet us, or even text us on the SE Radio hotline at 267-404-MYSE. That's 267-404-6973. And we'll include the questions you guys have for us each week into the show, kind of as a segment. But now we jump into our predictions. So we switch from this music to the lovely NFL music. All right, Joe, we got 3 games on tap, excluding the Eagles. We'll get to them in a second. But let's start with a big matchup. It would be the LA Rams traveling to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, both 7-2 teams, and kind of staring down the throat of the Eagles. What do you like in this game?
I love the Vikings in this game. I'm so interested to see how this Rams offense tries to attack this Vikings defense. It's definitely going to be one of those games you're going to want to tune in for. But I do like the Vikings in this game just because when you look at them, I know that we talked a lot about Case Keenum last week, but when you look at them, at least right now where they are, they're playing a team game. They're not just solely relying on a running back or a quarterback. They're playing all 3 phases well.
Yep.
When you look at the Rams, I know their defense has played decent, but really what people are talking about right now is their offense. So for me, I think, and even if you just look at what the Vikings have done on offense as well, look what they did last week. Case Keenum having a career day up there. Adam Thielen and Diggs looking tremendous. Is one of the best tandems you can argue in the league this season. So for me, I'm on the Vikings on this one. I love what they're doing as a team.
The one thing I like about the Vikings is their defense is very good, but it's like a lot of guys that you don't really hear about. You got Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Xavier Rhodes. Like those, they're big names, but they're not like superstar names. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think the one superstar they have is Everson Griffin, and he missed the game last week, so pay attention to that. But I really like the Rams in this one. They have the top offense in the league. They're averaging 32.9 points a game. They now have the top third down percentage by offenses. I think the Dome helps them because this game would be completely different if they were playing outside against the Vikings. Of course, I mean, it's kind of expected to see Keenum take a step back this week. He's not going to have 4 touchdowns. But the Rams, the one thing for me, as much as we talk about the Vikings and how good their defense is, the Rams have a pretty good defense too. They're ranked 3rd in points per game at 18, I believe. So, I kind of think it's going to be like a low-scoring game, 21-17, or maybe even lower in the teens, 19-17, something like that. I'm going to ride with the Rams this week. Let's move into another game, which a lot of people might not say it's close, but I think there's kind of like a wrench thrown into this. The game is being played in Mexico, which is twice the altitude of Denver. And New England just went into Denver and had a really good game. But they're playing the Oakland Raiders, who are technically the home team. Who do you like in this one, Joe?
I would hope that this game would be more of a show, considering how both offenses are capable of playing. But when you look at the line on this game, it just screams Patriots by 10.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady is a superhuman. Enough said. I'm on the Patriots here.
Yeah, like I just said, I mean, they just went to Denver and demolished that defense twice in a row because the Eagles played them the week before.
Right.
But, I agree. I think it's going to be a shootout, and it's going to be, one of those things that kind of displays what the NFL is all about, and that's high-scoring games, or at least that's what the fans want to see. But traveling to Mexico, I think that's pretty cool. I wouldn't be surprised if Gronk has a big game. I just feel like, finally healthy. And Tom Brady is Tom Brady, but his safety blanket is always Gronk. And, the Oakland defense really isn't good in the middle. Let's move on to game number 3. This is another primetime game. This will be played Monday night. But, there's always the storyline of Dan Quinn going back to Seattle, kind of where he grew his roots. But what's your thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons traveling to the Seattle Seahawks, Joe?
Finally, a Monday night game that I want to watch.
Seriously, you're not kidding.
But no, seriously, it's going to be interesting to see how Seattle responds after losing Richard Sherman on the back end, and especially now that they have re-signed former Eagle Byron Maxwell. That should be interesting to see how that secondary looks.
Byron Burnt Toast Maxwell.
Yeah, burnt toast. But for me, it's tough. Devonta Freeman, it most likely isn't going to play. He's got his second concussion of the year, which isn't good. He's a tremendous back. But when you really look at the Falcons, they've struggled tremendously, in establishing their identity and what they really wanted to do on offense this year after looking, night and day compared to last year. They kind of could do whatever they wanted to do last year. But for me, after losing Sherman and adding Maxwell, I know he was in that system, but both of their safeties are banged up as well. And I think this is one of those games where Julio really breaks out and really does what he does and goes to work. And I like the Falcons in this game.
Yeah, I hope so. For me, kind of what Gale was talking about earlier, games are won in the trenches. And when you look at the Falcons last week, they went up against one of the top offensive lines. I know they didn't have Ty Smith, but, one of the offensive lines against Dallas, and they really controlled on both lines of the scrimmage. On both lines, they dominated the game. So what I'm trying to say is Seattle has a very bad offensive line, and Dallas has a good one, and they kept Dak Prescott contained. You touched on it, Richard Sherman out. I think Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu potentially have a big game, leading to Matty Ice putting up some numbers. Tevin Coleman did fill in pretty well for Devonta Freeman, but he's kind of their passing back as well. So we shall see. I am also on the Falcons. It is now time to jump in to our best game of the week, and that would be the Philadelphia Eagles at 8-1 going to the 5-4 Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. Let's start with the injuries, Joe. We have Philadelphia. There's really only two, and we already talked about them, but let's just recap. We have Ronald Darby coming back with his ankle injury, first time in roughly 9 weeks, and that's not only great to see, but we think he steps in a limited role and kind of gives the Eagles something they've been missing, even though their secondary has been good. And then Zach Ertz, I saw he's still questionable. I would say, as the week goes on, he probably steps in and becomes a full participant by Friday and is good to go for Sunday. But right now he's battling that hamstring that left him out of Denver last week. As far as Dallas goes, they have quite a few. Let's start with the Zeke Elliott suspension. We all know that's a big hit for them. But there are some questionable players, including rookie Chidobe Awuzie with a hamstring. He's questionable. Tyron Smith, I just mentioned, is questionable again after missing last week. Jeff Heath, their safety, he's not great, but he is a starter for him, down with a concussion. They lost linebacker Justin Durant, who is questionable with groin. And, of course, doubtful would be Sean Lee, which is huge, and Dan Bailey. Just to wrap this up, two probable players for them would be Dez Bryant and Terrence Williams. They are expected to go, but they do have ankle injuries. How does this all kind of work into the matchup for you, Joe? Eagles getting healthier and Dallas getting weaker.
This is what we talked about early on in the season. Going into this game was really where we were going to see where the Eagles were at. And realistically, when you look at it, Dallas is falling apart all over the place. You have Jerry Jones in the media with Roger Goodell's situation going on. You have the Zeke suspension, multiple injuries. You got people questioning, is Dez Bryant still the same player that he was before? There's a lot of controversy surrounding Dallas right now, and it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, the Eagles are getting healthy. Obviously I like the Eagles in this game, but when you look at the injuries that they have, Sean Lee, makes a huge impact on that defense for them, and he always destroys us when he's in the lineup for them. But if they're without Tyron Smith again for another game, it's just pack your bags, don't even show up, because that line is going to feast.
The Eagles' defensive line, yeah, and like Gale said, and we've talked about before, the fact that they're too deep. You bring in Derek Barnett off the bench, Chris Long, yeah, that'll be a problem. Dan Bailey, He's been huge for them in the special teams game, and I know a lot of people don't like to talk about kickers, but Dan Bailey is one of the elite kickers in this league. And if he can't go, Sean Lee, really their quarterback on the defensive side, I really like the Eagles as well. And we'll jump into the breakdown in just a second. But as far as an injury standpoint, you got to like what you're seeing. And I've talked about this with Dallas as well. They have a young defense. And to see some of these younger guys, Awuzie, Justin Durant, Sean Lee, he is a veteran, but some of these guys, they're huge pieces to what Dallas tries to do on defense, and they're young, and I think the Eagles will be able to kind of take apart that secondary specifically. Their best player is probably Orlando Scandrick, who's been battling injuries all season. But getting to Dez Bryant, I really don't see him being a factor this week. I know he's kind of burnt the Eagles before in the past, but that was the past. Like, he's a new wide receiver that I would say is borderline top 20 in the league, and just doesn't have the same explosiveness he has. As far as the game kind of goes and breakdown, I would say look for Dallas to kind of max protect and Dak to try and get the ball out quick like Eli did before. Jason Witten, of course, old reliable for him, and kind of the safety blanket. But I wouldn't, I think the Eagles are going to send the blitz a lot in this game to try and get pressure on Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I agree. For me, two guys to look at on the offensive side would be Cole Beasley and Jason Witten. Those are guys you can't forget about. Jason Witten has made a career out of embarrassing the Eagles. I can't wait till he retires, to be honest with you. But yeah, and then Cole Beasley always usually, for the most part, puts in a good performance against the Birds. I know Patrick Robinson has played pretty well in the slot. So that's a matchup you can look at. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them go to hurry up. We'll see. I haven't really watched too many Dallas games to know if they're good at going on offense like that. They seem like an offense that really wants to pace themselves and establish their run.
Right.
They kind of have to change their whole philosophy after losing Zeke. So we'll see. But I really do like the Eagles' defensive line in this game. It's gonna be beautiful.
Yeah, they have the top rushing defense in the league, and you're right, Dallas. They try and run the ball, control the clock, and me and my buddy Justin talk about this all the time. It's like every time you see Dallas play, they'll wind down the first quarter with a 10-minute drive. They'll score, and then they do it again in the second quarter. And next thing you know, you're down 14 with like not that much time left, and teams kind of go frantically asking for questions on how to beat them. But they're good at controlling the clock, and we'll see. They might go to the quick passes like I mentioned. But as far as the Eagles' top run D, I have some stats of the week for you guys. And that would be that according to Reuben Frank, the run-pass ratio for the Eagles this season is 74% pass and 26% run, which is, crazy. We talk about it all the time, how they make teams one-dimensional, but to run it only, 26% of the time is nuts. And then the Eagles are allowing the fewest run attempts per game in NFL history at 18.6 per game. That's pretty incredible. It's been the strong suit. The defensive line, what more can you say about them? They make teams one-dimensional, and they get up on teams, and then you can't control the clock through the run, which is exactly what Dallas does.
Yeah, and I believe they've only allowed one rusher to go over 60 yards on them, and that was Kareem Hunt. And the only reason that even happened was because he broke one big, long
50,
run.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. I have two more stats of the week for you guys, and this is kind of based on the series. The Eagles have won five of the last 7 games in Dallas. And the series on Sunday Night Football is split 5-5, so the Eagles try to go above 500. Joe, do you have any closing comments before we throw out our final predictions?
No, just like I said, watch Cole Beasley and Witten on offense, and if I was going to touch on anything else, I would say don't sleep on DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. That plays defensive end for the Cowboys. He'll be going up against Lane Johnson. I know Lane Johnson held Von Miller to 0 sacks, but DeMarcus Lawrence has been one of the best in the league so far this season as well. So that's going to be something you're going to want to keep your eye out for.
And we also have seen Cole Beasley burn Malcolm Jenkins the first year he was here. So keep an eye out on that. I think the Eagles do pretty well in this. Rick on Rick on Facebook says it's going to be a nationally broadcasted beatdown, and let's hope so. My final prediction for the game before I give it to Joe, and he'll close it out, would be 33-20 Birds, improving to 9-1 on the season. I just don't see how the Cowboys will be able to keep up with the Eagles as they kind of dissect that young secondary of the Dallas Cowboys. How about you, Joe?
As always, I'm gonna hold my prediction on my score until our breakdown. So you have to check out our article this weekend.
It's a nice plug, but I hate when you do that.
But no, for me, I'm on the Eagles in this game. I think they pull away in the second half. I do expect there to be that much more of a game in the first half rather than the second half. But I would say that I think the Eagles are going to come out and try to make a statement game here, coming off their bye week. I know everyone's talking about Dallas, and Dallas, was the hot chick going into this season, and you still have some skeptics about Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson and their ability. But I really do think that, this is really one of those games where it's a playoff game in the regular season for these guys. And they're really going to come out here and go to work. And I wouldn't be surprised, if they put up a nice 30 spot and really hold them to, maybe one or two scores.
Yeah, I mean, there is, I guess some people can be frightened. The Eagles at times have come out of the bye week and kind of stumbled. And we've actually seen it in the last one or two games. The Redskins in San Francisco, they kind of came out flat, but you might see that, but I really think this is like a well-timed bye for the Eagles. They added some pieces, they've rested up, they got new players coming back. I really think they're going to win by double digits, and go Birds. I'll throw it over to Joe, and he'll shut down the show. And thank you all for joining us this Wednesday. Thank you again to Gail for joining us from fourthandjohn.com, and Joe, it's all yours.
All right, guys, as always, thanks for hanging out. Don't forget to head over to mysportingedge.com for our latest news, articles, and updates. Don't forget to head over there first thing Sunday to check out our post on our prediction articles. You'll see my score up there. And as always, guys, if you miss a show, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn Radio, and we'll see you next week.